But one thing I didn't mention earlier, and I think it's something that's quite important, is be very careful about putting siblings in a business together. The most difficult meetings I have ever had have been with brothers or brothers and sisters who've been in a business for many years together and they've fallen out. In a couple of cases, when I went, 3 or 4, I've gone in and they're now in their 50s and they're not speaking to each other. They will say to me, I wish I'd never done this because I've never been able to do what I wanted to do because I had to run it past my brother or my sister. And what happens is one is possibly more ambitious than the other one. And so one feels they've been held back, where the other one feels that they've been taking more risks than they would wanted to have done. And also you get the problem of, okay, when the people reach their 50s, you now have another generation, and what the hell happens then when you've got cousins expected to work together? And that might not work at all. And so I've come across businesses where it does seem to work very well. And that works very well because there's very much communication. It's probably a big business and everybody's got their separate bit. But even then you have to be careful, because what I found is the quarrel happens when the second parent dies. Because the parents keep a lid on it. They're the ones who referee it, if you like. And once the second parent dies, all hell breaks loose. Because then there's nobody there to keep them and to make the final decision. Because sometimes, say if you've got two brothers, if you like, in a business, and they're doing separate enterprises within the business and they're working very well and everything like this. When they want to sort of designate money to one thing, it's mum or dad who usually makes the final decision. When it's just them two left, they will quarrel like hell about it. And so either then they make provision for that in saying, right, okay, if we don't agree on anything, on things, we bring in a third party to help to sort of manage it, or they say we split the business. And what I say to a lot of people is, if you've got siblings in a business, maybe you ought to be thinking about how you would split it right from the word go. And so you've got a plan, because one of the worst things, I remember one meeting in Monmouthshire, I remember particularly well, 2 brothers in the business, in their 50s, not speaking to each other anymore, fallen out completely. Oh God, it was, really, they were never ever going to get on again, never. Not in business anyway. And what had happened was they'd had the original farm, and one brother was living in the original farmhouse. They bought the farm next door, and so the other brother was now living in the house that came with the farm next door. And as I said, they were never going to get on again. What had happened, they were beef and sheep farmers, and they also had a chicken laying business as well. And so when they came to look at splitting it as far as value was concerned, one brother got all the buildings and the other brother got all the land. Because what they'd done is all the buildings were up at the original farmhouse. Now if they'd thought early on, right, okay, we may need to split this business in the future, they may have put some buildings in the other farmstead in, and so it would have made it then easier to have split the business a lot easier. But they didn't, so that's what they had to do. So maybe going into, when you've put siblings in the business together, going in with the plan that, okay, this may need to be split in a few years' time or in the future, so that you plan so that it can be done. I'm dealing with a family in Cheshire, they're actually friends of mine as well. They have 3 sons, and they're in their 30s now, married, but 2 of them are married with children. And what they've done is, those 3 boys all want to farm. And so what they've said is, we are going to work together for 10 years. And they're about sort of 7 years left now. But we're going to work together for the next 10 years to build up this business so that it'll be enough for the 3 of us. So they're taking on rented land, they're setting up other things as well. And they've managed 2 farms now, they've got 2 farms, so they need another one now for the other brother, and that's it. But they've decided to work together with a time frame of when it's going to be split, work together to be able to grow that pie, as Linda said earlier, grow the pie to be able then to split it later on. So be very careful about putting brothers and sisters in a business together. It's interesting, in my area there's a well-known farming family there who are 2 brothers in the business, and everybody holds them up and says, oh, they're fantastic, aren't they? I've had a meeting with them and I know it's not fantastic, and they are working to split it because they are now in their early 50s, their children are coming on and they want very different things, so they know they're going to have to split that business, and those cousins are not going to work together, definitely not going to work together. So that they're already working that out. Luckily they're a big business and it's going to work well. So that was just one thing that I sort of hadn't mentioned this morning. Going on then to the older generation. And when I say older, I think, you know, we're all living longer, healthier lives. You know, and that may be a problem because, you know, it wasn't so many years ago, once a farmer reached 70, he was knackered and nearly dead. And so, but people are living longer, healthier lives now, and we need to be able to accommodate that. And so, you know, we need to be thinking about it at an early stage. So once you get to your 50s, you really ought to be thinking about where you're going to live in the future. You know, when you're going to move out of that farmhouse, what are you going to be doing? What are you going to live on? And maybe at that stage, I mean, I've 2 or 3 meetings I've had been the easiest family meetings I think I've ever had, some of them. Anyway, because a lot of people say about diversifying, and often it's the assumption that the younger generation will diversify. Sometimes it's a good idea for the older generation to be the ones that diversify because the next generation want to farm. And so in these few meetings, I've had the older generation in their 50s decided, right, okay, we're going to have to run another business. And what farmers don't realise is, and what farmers don't realise is your skills are hugely transferable. You probably realise it now because you're doing tourism, you know, you're going into it or thinking about it. Your skills are hugely transferable to other businesses. In fact, much more so than you realise. I have a friend who, when he retired, well, sort of retired, he stepped back from the farm, he bought the local garage, which is on the road to Fishguard, which is the ferry to Ireland. So he gets all the lorries and cars coming in there to fill up before they get on the ferry. And it's, you know, a little supermarket as well. And he said, I was speaking to him after he'd been doing it for about 2 or 3 years, and I said, you know, how do you manage from dairy farming to running this little business, you know? And he said, easiest thing I've ever done in my life. Easiest thing. And he said, and the farmers miss out on the most important sound in the world. I said, what's that? The sound of the till opening. So you know, you can do different things, and you do have a huge amount of skills because you're a jack of all trades, really. And so maybe thinking about that. So at a younger age, we need to be thinking about, right, okay, where are we going to live? What are we going to be doing? Have we got a pension? You know, how are we going to live? And that's really important. So when I talk to a family, you know, often, particularly if there's a problem there, I talk to the family about, you know, what the history is. Because in some families, that is very relevant to how things are going to carry on in the future. You know, there's been a problem in the past, and so that's colouring people's thinking. You know, I get called into quite a number of families where they've said, I haven't spoken to my brothers and sisters for the last 20 or 30 years, and I want to make sure that doesn't happen to my children, you know. And so there are certain things like that that I need to understand, you know, and what has happened in the past. And also to say to people, you know, because somebody will say, well, I didn't get the farm until father died or whatever, and I'm not sure what to do, I'm going to have to do the same. And I'm there to say, this is your turn. You do whatever you like. You don't have to do what previous generations have done. And you know, and some people think, God, I never thought about that, which is crazy, but people don't. So learning about the history is very important. Also then, asking the older generation what retirement means to them. Because retirement means different things to different people in farming community. From one end, it's, I can't wait to get out of the gate, to the only way you're getting me out of here is in a box, and all points in between, you know. And see, everybody in the family needs to understand what does retirement mean to that older generation. And for a lot of people, for the vast majority, probably it's, well, I'd like to help out on the farm and be of help. I'd like to be able to come and do things, but I wouldn't like to think that I have to be there all the time. You know, I'd like to be able to have more time off and things like that, but I would like to be there to help. And so you need to have that conversation to understand what role the older generation are going to play going into the future. And it could be, right, okay, what you're doing in 5 years' time, right? This is some of the questions I ask. Okay, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years' time? And say it's a dairy farm, well, I don't want to be milking cows. Okay, in the next 5 years, you're going to be standing back from milking cows. Who's going to be doing that, you know? And usually mother is there saying, I want to be doing the accounts again. Okay, and so right, okay, how are we going to hand the accounts on to the next generation? And so it's that sort of planning, you know, where are you going to be in 5 years' time? What are you going to be wanting to do in 10 years' time? How do you want to be involved in this business? Okay, there's an issue of tax and all that, and you need to get all the advice, but it's starting from what people want. And the older generation don't want to feel that they're being pushed out, and they don't want to feel that they're useless. They want to be part of that business going forward. And often the younger generation are very happy for them to be there, but you need to have clarity and understanding of what that role is going to be. So it's a very important conversation to have, very important conversation to have. Also then, the money side of it, you know, what you're going to live on in the future. Often farmers don't have much of a pension because they've reinvested money in the farm. And so what is your pension going to be? So we sit down with some people and say, right, okay, well, how much are you going to get? State pension, not much, okay. Have you got another pension? Right, okay, how much is that going to pay? What's the shortfall? Now, there's a saying, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And in agriculture, we do. Because if it wasn't for that older generation, that farm would not be there. Succession wouldn't happen, you know? And so it's really important that I recognise that the people who are retiring from that farm have a good lifestyle to live in, you know, because they've put in all that blood, sweat and tears over those years to be able to hand that farm on to the next generation. And that must be appreciated and recognised. They must not then be living on the breadline afterwards. So it's important that we understand how much they need to live on. Sometimes we have to go to the accountant about that, or we say, right, okay, you know, how much do you need to live on? And sit down and talk that through. Right, okay, what you're going to get from pensions, what is the shortfall? And often, the farm has to pay the shortfall to mum and dad. Now, it's important that you put a figure on it, and don't leave it open, because most people leave it open, you know, and mum and dad can take drawings whenever they want. Big mistake. A few years ago, when milk price was on the floor, if you remember those who were dairy farmers, milk price was really on the bottom a few years ago. And I heard about a family where they had an open thing where mum and dad were retired, and but they could have access to the account to pay their bills and all that sort of stuff. And it was a son and daughter-in-law were running the farm, and they were cutting costs like anything. To the bone, because they knew we had to survive this. Once we survive this, we are coming out of it, but we can't have any extra expenses at all. So they were cutting costs to the bone, and mum and dad went out and bought a car out of the farm account. Well, they nearly killed them. You know, and so it's really important to clarify, you know, how are mum and dad going to buy cars or whatever big ticket items in the future, and also how much they're going to have per year. And that money goes into the budget. And okay, it can be index linked with inflation and all that sort of stuff. But it goes in the budget, so mum and dad know exactly how much they're going to have to live on, and the person who's farming knows how much they're going to have to provide to mum and dad every year. It is a fixed sum. Now you've got to work out how this is going to work, because there may be tax implications. So again, you talk to your tax advisor about, you know, do they still remain in the partnership, etc., etc. Okay? But there are ways and means of doing it. But yes, so it's really clarifying it and not leaving it too open, because again, if things aren't clear, people are going to quarrel about it. Okay? And it's also good for the non-farming children to understand that mum and dad's pension is being paid out of the work on the farm. Sometimes they forget that. You know, that they're not paid towards mum and dad's pension. Mum and dad's pension is coming out of the hard work of the people who are inheriting that farm. And that has to be remembered as well. So that money side, very important. The other side then is housing. Where are mum and dad going to live? Is there going to be enough money to buy your house for them? And this is why you need to be thinking about this in your 50s at the latest. Because there needs to be some provision of where the hell are mum and dad going to live. And there are implications of people staying in the farmhouse. You know, because the person who's in the farmhouse should be farming. I mean, like if you're lambing or calving, you shouldn't have to be the person who's 4 miles down the road coming up at 2 o'clock in the morning to check on the cows or the sheep. You should be able to live on the farmyard. And also there may be tax implications for that as well. So be very careful about that. So when is that going to happen? Gosh, I've gone into family farms where, particularly in England, where there are massive great farmhouses, right, you know, and granny and granddad are living in the farmhouse in 2 rooms. You know, it's 6 bedrooms or something, and they're living in 2 rooms. And then son and daughter-in-law are living in this pokey little bungalow with kids hanging out the windows. You know, and because granny and granddad are now in their 80s, you ain't going to get them out of there. You know, because it's not fair. Particularly if dad has lived there all his life, he was born there, you ain't going to get him out in his 80s. You know, it's not going to happen. And so it's much better for people to start planning this at an early stage, because it's very difficult, very difficult. Okay, and also, you know, and it's quite interesting actually, and at this stage you ought to be listening to mum, Because usually there's a woman in that business who's put the farm first for the last 30 years or whatever, and nobody's ever asked her what she wants. And so it's very important to ask Mum what she wants. Where does she want to go? And she will often say, I would like a nice little bungalow down in the village, you know, and Dad is sitting there fuming at this stage. But, you know, and because she said, I don't want to be on the farm anymore. You know, I don't want people knocking on the door every 5 minutes or coming through with Wellingtons and all that. I want to have a quiet life and to be more practical, you know, have a practical house, which is my small bungalow that's warm. And so it's important to consider what Mum says as well. So that's the money and the housing thing. The other area you have to be very careful about is the self-esteem of the older generation. Farmers aren't people who happen to earn a living farming. They are farmers. That's who they are. And you cannot expect them to step back and say, like other professions, say, right, okay, you know, I'm retiring today, here's my gold watch or whatever, goodbye. That doesn't happen. And so you have to manage their self-esteem because they have a standing in the community, you know. I mean, every year they go, or every June they go around the Royal Highland Show and all those reps are trying to attract them into the stand with a glass of whiskey or something to try and flog them something. All of a sudden, if they're not the person who's actually running that business, they're not the ones who encourage them on that stand anymore, you know. And it does affect their self-esteem. And that's again where mental health comes in. So it's very important to manage that, you know. What are Mum and Dad going to do with themselves? What, particularly Dad usually, what the heck is Dad going to do? And Mother's saying, well, you ain't going to be under my feet all day, you know. It's really important to have that conversation. Well, what is Dad going to do? Okay, you can help on the farm maybe. And, you know, Mum usually says, well, I'd like a few days off somewhere, you know, a bit of a holiday. And it's not, you know, 2 months in Australia. It's usually, you know, a day off now and again. And so those conversations need to be had, so we understand what people want. And yeah, there is a bit of a conflict, you know, because Dad is saying, well, I don't like particularly going on holiday or something like that, or Mum says sometimes, I don't like going on holiday, and the other one does, but we've got to sort that out and talk it through. Right, so that's, you know, dealing with the older generation, and it's got to be done very carefully in some cases in particular. But, you know, as I say, we have to respect it. But on the other hand, you know, as I said, shoulders and giants and all that, we have to be careful because we have to be bringing young people into this industry. We're doing a huge disservice to this industry by not encouraging young people in. And we need to be doing it, you know, in a much better way because, and things are going to change. Things have always changed in farming, but things are changing very quickly at the moment. And we need young people to be coming in to be able to cope with that. You know, there's a lot of I've spoken to quite a lot of older generation people who said, I've had enough, I'm fed up with this, I can't be bothered anymore, I'm just going to carry on, you know, ticking over. That's probably not going to be good enough. We need the young people coming in now and saying, right, okay, we need to change things, we need to do things differently. And the industry needs it. So we're doing a huge disservice by not bringing young people in. And possibly, and this is what I'm going on to next, young people who are outside the industry. And so if you haven't got a successor in your business, and you're thinking, well, you know, I came across one man who, his children didn't want to farm. None of them wanted to farm, they were doing other things. But he had a grandson who was 15, was quite interested in farming. And he didn't want to farm, the grandfather didn't want to farm anymore, he had enough, you know. And so he said, but I don't want to sell the farm, because once that farm's gone, it's gone, you know. And also you get landed with a whacking great bill anyway. And also you put the money in the bank and it's worth less next week than it is this week. And so, you know, why would you want to sell, possibly? So there is a way of doing it, and that's a joint venture. Now, there are a lot of them happening. Funny enough, there's a pocket of them happening in North Wales, where people you're bringing in, the retired farmer is still categorised as a farmer. So he's not renting the farm out, so there's not a tax issue there, because he or she is still recognised as a farmer, because it's a joint venture, and you're bringing in a young person and giving them an opportunity to get their foot on the farming ladder. And it's working extremely well in some areas, because these young people, because they aren't inheriting a farm, they are very good. They have to be, because they're competing against other people to get those jobs. And so there's an opportunity to look at joint ventures. So think about it. I don't know what the standing is. You know, Linda mentioned something about it, and I don't know what the standing is in Scotland, but it's very much so. In Wales in particular, they are really pushing it now. Because there are a lot of people who haven't got successors, don't want to do the work anymore, and they don't want the farm to run down. You know, because if you rent it out, say you rent it out for summer grazing or something, you know, your buildings aren't being kept up to standard, the hedges are going all to hell, and the land, you know, and the land isn't being looked after properly. Whereas if it's a joint venture, then you're doing it in business with a young person and giving somebody a leg up in the industry. And I've spoken to the older generation who do this, and this is the best thing they've ever done. They love it because they said, oh, I was so sick of farming, and I've now got this young person who is so enthusiastic coming in, and okay, I've got to stand back. It's not my business, I have to stand back. But it's so great to see that person being given an opportunity, whereas they wouldn't have been in the past, because there's this joint venture structure. So, you know, I can talk a lot about that, but talk to people about that if that's something that you want to do. This man, who I was talking about, his grandson was 15. He said he's gone into a joint venture with a young farmer, and that's set for 15 years. So his grandson then will be 30, and so he will be at the stage then of being able to decide then whether he wants to come back and farm or not. But that young person who's been in there will have been given the opportunity to farm. They probably will have built up equity. They probably might even be owning animals, livestock at that stage, and they'll also be having a record at the bank, which means then they're more likely to be able to go out and borrow money to be able to set up themselves then afterwards. So really important. So no successor means, you know, does not mean that you have to sell that farm. The other thing, particularly in Scotland, I have to say this, particularly in Scotland I found it, in certain areas, girls can farm as well. You know, women can farm. And you know, there's nothing that riles me more than I speak at a meeting and then some old boy stands up at the back and says, well, he says, I haven't got a successor myself because I've only got daughters. Well, I could lay him out, right? So girls can farm, and particularly now with, you know, things are mechanised, and I've come across some very successful women farmers. So do not exclude your daughters from the opportunity of farming. I know the sons here sitting there thinking, God, I don't want my sister to have to stick it all in as well. But it's very important because, again, there's a psychological damage can be done to farming daughters who are not considered as for the inheritance. And so, it's particularly going forward, it is really important to think about the girls as well. And I've gone into some businesses where the son is inheriting the farm or going to inherit the farm. He's working on the farm, absolutely hates it. And the daughter is the one who's the real good business person, and she's the one who wants to farm, and they won't let her, which is crazy. I also know of a couple in Mid Wales who they've got two daughters, and one daughter is really keen on farming. She's a Nuffield scholar, she's an advisor, she's advising people how to farm, and they've not got confidence that she can farm, which is crazy. You know, she's telling everybody else how to farm, and yet her own parents won't allow her to farm. And she's in a hell of a state, to be honest. You know, there are mental health issues there because she's so upset. Because she thinks my family don't think I'm capable of doing it. So don't forget the girls. Okay? Going on to wills and power of attorney, that has been covered. Wills, though, for God's sake, you know, everybody has to have a will. Even if you don't own anything, but you're a beneficiary in a will, you should have a will. And this was brought home to me actually in Scotland, where I met a young woman who said she was made to make a will as soon as she could, because she was the beneficiary in her mother's will of the farm, and her mother and father had divorced. And they were driving along one day, it must have been a fairly depressing conversation, but anyway, they were driving along one day, and the mother and daughter were in the car, and they said, gosh, if we had a car crash and we were both killed, this is what would happen. If somebody, both people are killed and they can't decide who was killed first, they designate, the law will say then that the oldest person died first. So mother's will would have been invoked, so the farm would have passed to the daughter. If she didn't have a will, the chances are that share of that farm would have gone to her father, who had nothing to do with the family farm at all, and they didn't want it because he was a bit of a waster and all that sort of stuff. So, even if you're a beneficiary in a will, you should have a will, okay? And make sure it's up to date. I would suggest you look at it at least every 2 years, just to make sure it's still up to date. Just pull it out the drawer and look at it, you know. And if something happens, as Linda said, you know, marriage, birth, death, divorce, whatever, look at your will to make sure it's still relevant. And yeah, don't go to W.H. Smith and pull one off the shelf. Disaster. Power of attorney, yes, look at power of attorney, very important. People don't realise that, you know, if there's somebody who's a sole signatory in a business, and something happens to them, a stroke or whatever, that business shuts down completely. Absolutely completely. Come across businesses that have happened. Bank accounts frozen. Again, it was a dairy farm. The milk buyer didn't turn up to pick up the milk. The lot. Everything just froze until they sorted it out. So if you can have power of attorney, that's really important. Quite simple. You know, I've done it for my children. Both my children are powers of attorney for me. You know, they got sent a letter and then we all came back to it and they agreed and all that, and now we've put the thing away in a drawer. You know, I am relieved that there has to be medical evidence to say I've gone gaga, because they're convinced I have already. But, you know, at least it's there, and I know, you know, I can forget about it. As Lynn said earlier, it's like an insurance policy. Okay, so, you know, I could talk forever and ever about this, as you may have gathered. But if there are any comments or questions or anything like that, incidentally, I don't charge for talking on the phone. So if anything I've mentioned today triggers something with you, and you think, God, I wouldn't mind asking her, you're very welcome to ring me. Caroline's got my contact details, but you're very welcome to ring me at any time.
Have you got a cut-off point, like 3 hours?
No, I haven't really. I mean, the other thing is, don't phone me when Wales are playing rugby or the Scarlets are playing rugby, because I won't answer the phone, okay? But otherwise,
I
yeah.
do charge